Good afternoon. Today is Sunday, July 12th, 2020, approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Uh, we're currently meeting with Jeanne Borgen, and I would like her to give us a brief explanation and biography as to where she came from, where she's at in life, and where she's going, and the basic uh, things that she has done for various different agencies. So, with that being said, Jeanne, welcome. Uh, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. It's sort of hard getting into your life a little bit, but I think I should start where I became psychic. Although I didn't have an easy childhood, and I've talked to a lot of psychics, and they did not have easy childhoods either. It's almost like you start learning from the day you're born, and you don't stop. You're always learning until the day you leave this planet. So, what happened to me though was I had married and I had 4 children. And I was going into the hospital for some minor surgery. And I was supposed to be home for dinner and everything was fine. And I went into the hospital, and when they took me in, the anesthesiologist and a nurse was in the room, and they told me that my doctor was scrubbing and if it was okay if they just put me under. And I said, of course, go ahead. And so he administered the anesthesia, and as he did that, my heart stopped. Now, I was a young mother and, no health problems except for this little minor surgery I was having. And the doctor came into the room. But during this time, I guess everything sort of blew up because they were not expecting anything serious. I crossed over. And as I went across, I stood there and everything was beautiful. I felt so peaceful. But
Your definition of crossing over is between life and
and
death,
death, yes,
or near death experience.
near death experience. And I was fascinated because everything had light in it. The grass had light, the trees, the flowers, everything was light. And it shimmered. And then I saw that there was a place where I could see shadowy figures gathering, and I knew, and it was sort of up on a hill, and I knew I had to go up there. And this man came toward me, and he put his hand out, and he said, "Go back." I didn't want to go back. For the first time in my life, I felt really peaceful. So I'm trying to get around him. And every time I moved, he moved. And he just kept saying, "Go back, go back." And then the next thing I knew, I was in the operating room and I was above looking down at my body. And I could see everything that was happening. And I was actually laughing to myself because there was my doctor. And I heard him say, "Her husband's going to kill me." And he was a personal friend.
Mm.
And he was wearing yellow and green plaid golf pants at my operation. And that struck me funny because, of course, I hadn't seen him before I was put under. And I found out later he was going to play golf after my operation and go out and have fun. And they were working on me. I wasn't concerned about it. I just watched them and listened and whatever. And then the next thing, I'm in recovery. And I've got a nurse standing over me saying, "What's your name? What's your name?" And at this point, I'm trying to remember what happened to me because I thought this is really important. But I didn't know why. I just felt that way. I'm trying to tune her out and ignore her. She's, "I know you're awake. What's your name?" And finally, I looked at her, opened my eyes, looked at her. I said, "If you don't know who I am, we are in terrible trouble." So she made some comment about being a wise gal and whatever. And so I stayed in recovery, and then they started taking me to a room. And I thought, wait a minute, I got to go home. I got 4 kids and dinner to fix. And they just said doctor's orders. Nurses don't say anything except doctor's orders. And they took me in, and I was put into a room, into a bed. And I'm laying there thinking, how am I going to get out of this? You know, I got my 4 children at home. When at that point, in walked a nurse. And she said hello, but she went over the cabinet and she's putting little things in the cabinet. And I said, well, did you have fun with George Saturday night? And she turned around and she looked at me and says, well, do you know George? And I thought, no, I don't know George. But I know they double dated and she went out on a date with him Saturday night. And I'm sort of puzzled, but it's not really bothering me at that time. And then, you know, she looked at me sort of funny and she got up and she left. And then in came an RN. And she's taking my blood pressure and I heard her say it, so I repeated it and I said, is that good? She says, how do you know your blood pressure? I said, you just told me. She said, no, I didn't. So I thought, God, they're all talking to themselves. They don't even know they're talking to themselves.
So you're seeing this intuitively.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even realize what intuitive was. I mean, I was a housewife with 4 children. We didn't think about things like this. So then I told her, she took my pulse and I repeated it because I heard it. And then I asked her about my pulse rate. I says, what's normal? She says, how do you know what your pulse is? She says, did you take your pulse? Are you a nurse? I said, no. I said, you just told me. She said, I did not. And I could see she's getting frustrated. So she goes out into the hall, and the station was right outside my door, and she's calling my doctor. And I thought, oh boy, what's going on here? And then this black janitor walks in, and he's mopping the floor. And I haven't got anything to do, so I said, how's your daughter Jennifer? And he said, oh, she's doing really well, and she's eating watermelon and ice cream, and her friends are coming over. He said, do you know Jennifer? And I thought, no, I don't know Jennifer. And for the first time, I felt panic with the situation. And I thought, how did I know about Jennifer? But I know that they live in North Richmond. They've got a really nice little house with a white picket fence, and she's just had her tonsils out. And it bewildered me because how did I know it? And so I'm sitting there trying to figure this out, and and then I noticed at that point as I'm trying to do it, I kept seeing colors, swirling colors, but I thought it was my eyes because of the operation. At this time, I did not realize I didn't have it, never had it. Guess I didn't need it. So I'm seeing these swirling colors, and I said, I keep seeing these colors around you. And, they said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. When the doctor came in, I told him about it, and he had a eye doctor come in and examine my eyes. And he said, Jeanne, you're a little nearsighted, but there's nothing wrong with your eyes. And then I says, well, why do you have this white around the body? And then there's blue and green. And he said, you really see this? And I said, yeah, and it's bothering me. And I said, something's wrong. And he said, we're going to keep you here for some while, and we're going to run some tests. I was in the hospital 7 days. And then I went home. And at that point, and I was always guarding, trying to shut these voices out of my head. I thought, I'm going crazy. So when I got home, I felt better, but then I went down, we'd have coffee with the neighbors every morning for an hour. I didn't realize what these women thought about. while they're sitting there. And it bothered me because, some of it was a little vicious. And these were my friends. And I'm listening to all of this and whatever. So I cut out the coffee clutches. They went down the tubes. And I love children. I didn't have a problem with the children. We counted them. There was 25 children at the top end of our block. And most of them were at my house. And, they had free reign in and out. But I didn't deal with adults. I found I couldn't go to a restaurant at first because I kept picking up thought forms from people in the restaurant. So what I did is I tried something. I sat in a booth and I had protected the back of my head. And then I tried putting up a barrier to protect myself from all this conversation. And it worked. But sometimes when I went to a restaurant, we had to wait for that table that was against the wall. And that was a little, my husband kept thinking, can't you make this easier for me?
So your back was against the wall whenever you went out to dinners?
Yeah, had to be up against the wall or I started picking things up. And I had to laugh because, you get a group of men in there and you'd be surprised what they think about. But I know what they think about. So anyway, it sort of became, but there were a couple of times it was confusing. Like with the waitress, I felt something about a car. And I kept getting the car, but I wasn't getting it all. And so finally, I called her over and I started talking to her. And I said, you're not new here. And she says, no, this is a part-time job. And she says, I had to take it because I got to pay my car insurance. And I thought, oh, it's just car insurance. So I felt a lot better because I was wondering if it was something that was really bad. So I still became a recluse. I couldn't be around people. And then one day, somebody pounded on my door. I mean, she was hysterical and she was just pounding. I opened the door and she says, can I talk to you for a moment? And I said, okay, come in. And I gave her a cup of coffee. And I said, okay, calm down. What's your problem? And she says, I know you have these powers. My first thought was, is that what they are? Powers? I'm a mother of 4 kids, and that was my role. And so she said, my sister in New Mexico has had a stroke. And I don't know if I go there, will she be alive when I get there? Or she says, can you tell me about this? And I said, just calm down and let me see. And at this point, I'd never done a reading at all. So I looked at her and I said, no, your sister has Bell's palsy. And she will recover, and she's going to be fine. And I said, but she does have high blood pressure, and she's gained too much weight. Her feet have been swelling. And I went into all of this with all the complications. I said, those things aren't going to kill her, but she needs to get her health in order here. And so she says, do you mind if I tape this? Because I'd like to play it to my sister. And I said, no, I don't mind. So she got her tape recorder. I set it all over again and added a few more additional things that I was picking up about her general health. And then I forgot about it. And then it was several days later, it was right after dinner, the phone rang, and it was a doctor from New Mexico. And he said, we just talked to Mrs. So-and-so. And you did a medical diagnosis for her. And I thought, oh, God, I'm in trouble. You can't do that. And now I got a doctor on the phone. I was scared. My heart started pounding and everything. And he said, we had a meeting about you here. That made it even worse. A meeting. And he said, and all the doctors listened to the tape. And he said, we'd like you to move here and work with us. And I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, why? He says, we can work around things. And I said, no. I said, I have 4 children, just bought this house. My husband has a job. I can't move to New Mexico. And he said, well, we'll get you a house. We'll do this. And he's telling me what they're going to do. And I said, I'm so sorry. I would really like to help, but I just can't move. And he said, well, if you ever change your mind, would you let us know? And you take down my number, my name, and whatever. And I did. And he started to hang up when I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, what? And I said, what spells palsy? And he said, you don't know? I said, no, I never heard of it. He says, well, it's like a stroke. But he goes into this big explanation. He said, she's going to be fine, just like you said. And I said, okay, I'm glad about that. So anyway, I hung up, and then I turned around to my husband, and I said, they wanted us to move to New Mexico. He says, not on my watch. So I said, I told him no. So, but it got me thinking that maybe I can do something about this. Now, before this happened, though, I was pretty desperate. And I was very religious. I still am religious. I went to church every Sunday with my children. And so I went to to my church, and I told them what I was going through. And at that time, I used the word, I'm possessed by the devil, because I felt like I had to be possessed by the devil. And he ended up, saying that there was, you're just upset, and, you've been through changes, and it didn't do any good. When I left, I was still depressed. So somebody told me that Catholics do exorcisms. I wasn't a Catholic, but I went to a Catholic church, and I talked to a priest, and he said, well, priests don't do exorcisms. You have to go to the bishop. I said, where do I find the bishop? I was determined I was going to go through an exorcism. So I finally got to the bishop, and he said, he listened to my story, and he patted my hand, and he said, Jeanne, I don't think you're possessed. And I started crying, and I said, yes, I am. This is terrible. I'm possessed. And he said, no. He said that God does strange things sometimes. And if you go home and just relax, God will show you the way. And I thought, no, I'm going to have an exorcism. Well, he said, okay. And he gave me an exorcism. And when it was all over, I was still picking up thought forms, and everything was still happening. It didn't go away. And I really started crying then. And he's hugging me and whatever. And then he said, remember what I said. God will show you the way. Just believe. Well, I went home, and God wasn't really fast about this, because this woman didn't show up knocking at my door it was a little less than a year. But all this time I was trying to control this horrible thing that the devil put on me. I blamed him, not God. So anyway, when this was all over, I thought there's something to this, and I need to do something with it. I can't live like this. I got to learn how to control it. And because it was controlling me and my life, and it was not an easy thing to go through. I know people are born psychic or it comes on early. This came on really fast due to the death situation. So what I did is I started really going on a search. And how I did it is I'd run up to different people, ask them a question so I could confirm what I was getting. If I can confirm it, then I was right. So nobody was safe around me. And I'm sitting there at the bus stop, and I'm waiting for the bus, and I turned around and I saw this car salesman polishing cars in a lot. So I got up and I walked over to him, and I said, what are you polishing cars for? You're supposed to be singing. And he said, I can't sing. And I said, have you ever tried? And he says, no. Well, I sing in the shower, he said. I said, no, I mean real singing. So I said, try it. You'll like it. And then I went back and got on the bus. Well, I got a phone call, and he went down to a bar that weekend, and he asked if he could sing with the band because some crazy woman told him he could sing. He sang all night long till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then got a job singing. And later on, he became very popular. I won't give away his name because that's private. But the thing of it is I went down to Los Angeles to a big party, and there was a lot of stars there, all Western. You know, Merle Haggard and a lot of different people that were big stars. And this woman walks up to me, and she said that she was the sister to the boy or to the man that I told he wasn't a boy. But I looked at her and I said, why aren't you writing music? And she says, tomorrow. You know? And I said, great. I said, you're supposed to write music. Well, the way it turned out, if her husband was looking at how her brother was so popular, and I felt he was threatened. And so he didn't want her writing music. So I ended up, she got sick, she was in the hospital, she couldn't move, except she could write or whatever, but she was pretty well situated in the bed and had to have help. And so all she had was a tablet. And I said, why don't you write your music? You got to do something here. So she started writing music. And I said, you know, it's pretty bad that you have to go into the hospital half paralyzed before you do what you're supposed to do. But she started giving her songs to her brother, and she did pretty well. So a lot of people, I started wondering how many people out there are talented that are not even using their talent. And I started doing readings, and I felt the minute I started it, it happened by chance. I was a big executive for a manufacturing cosmetic company. And I was on the Don Chamberlain show. He was a disc jockey in Oakland. And I was invited to talk about the product. And the topic of the day, he had a topic every day. And the topic that day was being psychic and having psychic ability. So anyway, we talked off when he was in between and whatever, and I told him a little bit about what I'd gone through. And the next person that called in, he said, you know, I don't have an answer to your question, but I have somebody here who can answer it for you. And so she asked me the question. Of course, I started talking, and the whole switchboard lit up. In fact, we even had several calls come in on the same line. The manager came rushing in and he says, I don't know what you're doing, but don't stop. And then it was so popular that Don Chamberlain asked me to come in once a week and do a show. So I had fun that day. It was something that was sort of unique, and I loved the people that called. I mean, some of the questions were really interesting, and so I started that, and it was a 4-hour show. So I was on for 4 hours, and Don sat back that day and sort of, you know, did the advertising and got in, but I sort of ran the show that each time. So then he went to another station, and by this time I'm getting pretty popular. So I'm on the radio, and I followed Don to the other station. And then I started doing a lot of different psychic things because I was now meeting psychics and getting into the field. But it started, and of course I quit my job. And just went full time into what I was doing. But there were so many things that I got into that were really interesting with people. When my first police case came in, it was somebody that I knew. And we were at the boat show, and my husband was in sailboats, and so we had to go to the boat shows. And there was a friend of ours there, and I looked at him and I got this vision, and his daughter was in the air, and she looked like an angel. And as I'm looking at this angel, I thought, oh my God. And then I turned to my husband as we walked away, and I took him away, and I said, Lisa's going to die. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And he says, can you do something? I said, I don't know. And so I went back to the man and I said, how's Lisa? And he said, oh, she's really good. She got really good grades. In fact, she's going out on the boat with all of her friends this next week. And I said, she's not sick or anything. She feels okay? And he said, yeah. And he said, why would you say that? And I said, oh, I don't know. I was just, there's something going around, with the teenagers. And I was trying to back out of it. And then I got this call on Saturday morning, and he said, Jeannie, it's Lisa. And I said, I know, John, I'm so sorry. And he said, she's missing. And I thought, I didn't know that. I just saw her dead.